friends. I'm just going to jump right into this. So for a long, long time, I have talked a really great game, I feel, about how important it is to feel and allow our feelings, whatever they are, even if they're uncomfortable and we don't like them. We think they're quote unquote bad feelings. And there are really no good or bad feelings. That's a myth. There are comfortable and uncomfortable feelings, in my opinion. But no feeling is good or bad. Placing a judgment label on a feeling is just not helpful, I don't think. And I realized recently that as good of a game as I was talking about the importance of feeling and allowing all of my feelings, I realized I wasn't really all that good at it, and I'm still getting better at it. I'm not always great at it. It's a process, this learning to allow and feel and let ourselves feel things that don't feel comfortable. And I wanted to share with you today one thing that really helped or has been helping me facilitate this process of learning to feel and allow and accept whatever my feelings are, especially if they're uncomfortable feelings to feel in my body. I realized that I needed to heal a part of me that felt unsafe to feel and allow certain emotions. And so today I want to talk about something I came up with that I called my intentional release practice. And I discovered this practice while I was doing some work with a coach around healing some childhood trauma. And basically I was working through my age ranges from birth all the way up to, so it was from birth all the way up through the death of my mother when I was 24. And I was going back through my timeline and giving my younger self, the younger versions of myself, the things that they needed. And at one point, I realized that one of the things my younger self really needed was to actually acknowledge, feel, and release her emotions. At the time when I was a child, I was witnessing my mom deal with diabetes and kidney failure, and all of those are really scary things to witness as a child. I was really scared, and my parents certainly never told me to not feel scared or to not talk about my feelings. They were very, very emotionally supportive, in fact. But there was a part of me as a child, an unconscious part of me, that felt safer just not acknowledging that fear. And it makes sense, right? I mean, to really let myself as a 9 or 10-year-old say, my mom might die, and that's really scary. And to actually feel that level of fear, it would have been completely overwhelming. Why would I have intentionally chosen to put myself through any of that when it was so much easier to kind of shut down from that or run away from that in some way? And now as an adult, knowing what I know about emotions, I can actually recognize that my 9 and 10-year-old self, and many other past versions of me, really would have benefited from acknowledging, feeling, and releasing those uncomfortable emotions, acknowledging the scary things that were going on instead of kind of trying to put on a brave face and keep going and everything's going to be okay and we're all right, which was kind of where I unconsciously found myself going as a child. And I also realized now as an adult, I actually have the capacity and the space in my own life right now to hold space for those younger versions of myself and to let them feel whatever it is that they need to feel. And I also knew that I needed this practice, this intentional release practice that I came up with. I needed it for myself as an adult now because I was still carrying this tendency to deny stress, to not acknowledge my feelings, even to myself. I tend to, and this is something that I'm working on, I tend to hold tension in my body and not quite realize it. And I know it's much healthier to acknowledge, feel, release emotions. But it's like my subconscious still can get stuck in that childhood survival strategy of, I don't want to feel this scary stuff. This is terrifying, and so I am not even going to go here. It was what I was familiar with and comfortable with, so I kept doing it until I realized that it was actually holding me back in a lot of ways. Holding tension in my body and not acknowledging stress just wasn't healthy. And my tendency to not share my feelings with myself or with others, I was meaning for that to protect myself and others, but I was actually harming myself in some ways by holding all of that inside. And I've come to realize that sharing it with myself and acknowledging it, releasing it is healthier. And then also sharing it with others doesn't harm them in any way. Just sort of sharing and acknowledging, I'm stressed or I'm feeling scared about this situation or whatever is happening, doesn't actually harm the other person that you share it with. And I think that was another thing I was carrying over from childhood, was I was afraid to share my emotions with my mom because I didn't want to burden her more, because I knew she was already worried and scared about the situation, about her health and things. And so I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want to make waves. And again, I did all of this unconsciously and to my own self. You know, my mom was very emotionally supportive. And yet it was hard for both of us, I think, to acknowledge the scary that was happening and to want to actually share it with each other because we were worried about harming the other person. But really, if we had sat together and acknowledged how scary this all was, that probably would have done a lot for us in a lot of ways. So the intentional release practice that I came up with was intended to be this first step in acknowledging and feeling kind of whatever I needed to feel. I basically created a playlist of very sad songs that, made me cry pretty much. And every day for about a week, I would literally lock myself in my office so that nobody could bother me. And I would put on this playlist and I would just let myself feel. And I really didn't force any emotions. I wasn't like, I have to try, I'm trying to cry. It wasn't about that. But it always just happened. And after about a week, maybe a little less, the emotions that wanted to be released, they switched from grief and sadness to rage. And so I ended up one day, I was like, I need some Linkin Park in this playlist. And sure enough, I found a nice Linkin Park playlist and I let all my angry feelings out, it was good. So the practice overall was intensely rewarding, intensely cathartic, intensely healing, and intensely exhausting. And I remember telling my husband about it as I was going through it and saying, I'm really tired. Like, this is exhausting doing, maybe like the playlist would be about 15 or 20 minutes. And I was just exhausted by the end of it. And he was like, well, yeah, that makes sense, right? So he was very supportive and affirming in my feelings around that. And I definitely feel now more healed regarding all of the childhood stuff, having opened up this space for the younger past versions of myself to feel and release whatever they needed to feel and release that they didn't feel safe to do at the time for whatever reason. And while I still sort of carry this residual habit behavior of not sharing or not acknowledging my own stress, my own emotions, I feel much more aware of that pattern of behavior within myself, and therefore I can catch it faster. I'm more aware of it. I can see it when I'm doing it, and then it just becomes a process of intentionally making new choices when I catch myself in that place, when I start to notice, oh, I'm doing that thing where I'm really stressed, but I'm not acknowledging it to myself or anybody else. Let's go ahead and what can we do right now in this space that would be nurturing for me, that would help me handle and deal with and release this underlying emotion. So if this has inspired you in some way to create your own intentional release practice, please do so. Please do whatever you need to take care of yourself, your current version, your past version, any of your past versions, any of your future versions. Take care of your own self and your own needs. Because that's another important theme for this podcast episode. Giving yourself what you need. You now, you in the past, all the yous, you in the future. I recently heard someone say that we can be the caretaker of our future self, which I thought was really beautiful. And when we ask, what do we need? And then we really listen and we're really honest with ourselves, and then we find a way to give ourselves whatever it is that we discover we need. That's a really, really powerful practice. It's a practice of self-care. It's a practice of self-love. It's having our own back. And that really feels good. It's a practice of self-trust. And it's one of the best things that we can intentionally practice for ourselves and intentionally give to ourselves. So that's what I have for you today. If you would like to share this podcast with other people, please do so. I would love that. If you want to comment about this podcast in some way, I think you could leave a review or a comment on YouTube under the video of the podcast. You could send me an email, amy@thealignedactor.com, and just let me know your thoughts on this. You can also check out my website, which if you are deductive, you might be able to figure out from my email address. My website is thealignedactor.com, and I will see you next time. Bye.